In the next display, we see a bit more information about John Jones, Enoch Curtis, and Harry W. Jones. And there's a picture of Almond Z. Madison, who was the person who preserved all of these records. This is Harry Wild Jones, and it was his father, Reverend Howard Malcolm Jones, who was the minister here during the Civil War. It is Howard Malcolm Jones' wife, whose father wrote the lyrics to My Country 'Tis of Thee, better known as America. And this is Harry Wild Jones as a child here in Fredonia. He spent his professional career in Minneapolis. The next display features John Jones, the architect who died right about here at the base of the tower. These are some of the buildings that he designed before his death. Of course, you know about the Fredonia Baptist Church right here. Also, his own home in Westfield, which later became the home of course, Secretary of State for Abraham Lincoln, William H. Seward. And of course, that's another story, much connection to the anti-slavery movement in Fredonia. Other homes by John Jones included a home on East Main for a couple of Baptists, and that home is still existing. It's quite beautiful. And for her brother, a home on Forest Place, which also still exists. And there is a home on Eagle Street that exists in part. It has been moved across the street, so half of it still stands. And his own home on East Main Street now used to be on West Hill. The next display, the third in our series, covers the window for David Barrow and his wife, and the window for Uretta Pettit and her daughter, Helen Pettit Barker. David Barrow was a very interesting person who was at first very popular, a very well-known merchant in Fredonia, but then was somewhat despised by the church because he questioned a minister. Because he did that, part of the congregation was quite angry with him, but the other half supported him. His half of the congregation moved across the street to the Fredonia Academy and met there for 8 years. Toward the end of the 1840s, the congregation reunited, and Deacon Barrow remained in this church for the rest of his life. He lived to be a very old man, and he was a revered deacon and very much loved and respected. And there is evidence that he was very close to the Pettit family, Eber Pettit having been the conductor on the Underground Railroad. His window is right here. This window was dedicated by Eber Pettit, the Underground Railroad conductor, and his son-in-law, Darwin R. Barker. Eber's daughter, Helen Pettit Barker, was married to Darwin R. Barker, and she was a wonderful woman who contributed many special services toward the Fredonia community, toward the Seneca Nation, and toward African American schools in the South. This is her daughter, Dora Barker, who did not live past young womanhood. And the window is also dedicated to Helen's mother, Uretta Sweet Pettit. This baptistry was probably placed about 1912. Originally, the Baptists in Fredonia were baptized in Canadaway Creek or Lake Erie. Late in the 19th century, Deacon Barrow spent his own money to build a baptistry downstairs. And behind this baptistry was a long stairway that took the congregation downstairs to that baptistry. This baptistry is still in use. Again, it probably dates to about 1912. The pipe organ in the Fredonia Baptist Church was originally purchased by the congregation in the 1870s, but it did not look like this. It was smaller, and it was in the far left-hand corner of the sanctuary. This is about 1912, this much later location of the choir loft, the organ pipes, the console, and the platform. The organ was originally in the far back corner of this sanctuary. The minister's stand was back behind the present choir loft, and this platform was not here. Instead, there were seats, at least this far, and probably even beyond this point, because there were two more matching windows behind the current choir loft. But in the 1870s, when the first pipe organ arrived, the organist was this gentleman, Clarence Lewis. He was actually a bobbin maker, and he made croquet sets, so it wasn't his strength to be working on a pipe organ. But his diary, which was recently found on eBay by Jim Boltz, tells us that he did help to work on the pipe organ, and he was so interested in its construction that he was here as often as he could to provide assistance. The public or anyone interested in these records can find them on the internet. One can Google the Chautauqua County Historic Structures in order to find the many Baptist houses in Fredonia that we have located so far. And in order to find the Baptist records, one can Google Chautauqua GenWeb, and then choose churches, and then choose pamphlet. We are now at the next display, which tells us about the two windows opposite the barrel window and the pettit window. One of these windows was dedicated by Louise Taylor's husband to her. And this picture is Louisa, who lived from 1834 to 1880. This is the Louise Taylor window. By her children. Again, these are photos that came from the 1868 album, which coincidentally came back to the church by the 1913 architect. The last dedicated window was dedicated by Julia Forbes Grant and her husband Louis B. Grant to the son they lost, most likely in the Civil War. We have talked about their home. It was on East Main, and their private burial ground is a very small gated burial ground in one corner of Pioneer Cemetery. They were also the couple who donated the parsonage at 78 East Main to the church. It once looked like this. This is the Grant window.